Welcome back to the deep dive.
Great to be here.
So, have you ever, hit a massive goal? Maybe you got that promotion, finished a huge project.
Yeah. Launch the business, something big.
Exactly. And then, like, the moment you cross the finish line, it feels like it just sprints another mile away.
Ah, yes. It's that classic achievement trap, isn't it?
Totally. If that sounds familiar, then this deep dive is definitely for you.
Because that moment where you expect maybe a bit of rest, it just gets replaced instantly.
Yeah, by an even bigger set of expectations, more complexity.
We're always leveling up, it feels like, but the game just doesn't seem to end.
Well, today we're diving into some really fascinating concepts. They're extracted from a text called The Paradox of Perpetual Success.
Interesting title.
Right. And the core idea, the thesis this source puts forward, it basically tackles two big questions.
Okay, what are they?
First, why is modern ambition, this perpetual chase? Why does success feel like it never truly ends?
Right, the endless hamster wheel feeling.
And second, and this is crucial, how do we manage to, and this is the text's phrase, pause without losing momentum?
Okay. That's a really essential duality there. Pause and keep momentum.
Exactly.
So the source, it sounds like it first diagnoses the problem, this sort of systemic pressure we're all under, and then it offers a framework for, well, maybe survival, or at least managing it.
That's the idea. So our mission today is to sort of rapidly unpack the core concepts here.
Right. Both the paradox itself and the practical solution it's hinting at.
We want to skip the really dense theory, and get straight to the why this happens and the how we might deal with it.
Makes sense. Get to the actionable stuff.
Exactly. So for you listening, this is really about getting that immediate, applicable knowledge from this source.
So you can look at your own career path, maybe?
Yeah. Not as just a race to some final point, but maybe more like a system you need to learn to manage effectively.
Okay, I like that framing, a system to manage.
So, okay, let's unpack this first big concept then. Perpetual success. What does the source really mean by that?
Well, when the source uses that specific term, perpetual success, it's fundamentally trying to shift how we define ambition.
Shift it from what?
From the traditional view. We're usually taught that success is terminal, a point you reach.
Like climbing a ladder, getting to the top floor, and boom, you're successful. Done.
Right. But this source, it seems to tear that whole narrative down pretty quickly.
How so?
It suggests that in today's environment, the fast-paced world we're in, the success we achieve today, it's really just the prerequisite for tomorrow's struggle.
Oof. Okay, so it's not a destination. It's more like an entrance fee.
Exactly, an entrance fee to the next level, which is probably going to be even harder.
Wow.
And what's really interesting is how the text frames this as a paradox.
Right, the paradox of perpetual success.
It suggests success isn't some fixed state you arrive at. It's more like an operating system.
An operating system.
Yeah, and one that's designed inherently to be infinitely recursive. It just keeps looping back on itself.
Okay, recursive. Like a video game, where you finish World 1.
Precisely. You finish World 1, and it just unlocks World 2, which is harder than World 3.
And you never actually, beat the game.
You just keep encountering new levels, new difficulty settings. The game, in that sense, never truly ends.
That's a really powerful analogy. So we're kind of conditioned to think the goal is getting to the next level. But the source is arguing the goal is the next level, like the process itself.
Yes. The system basically ensures the chase never stops by constantly raising the stakes.
Okay, that's a critical insight, especially for you listening.
Definitely. Because the paradox the source talks about, it isn't really presented as a flaw in your personal approach or, how ambitious you are.
It's not about you failing.
No, it's framed as the intrinsic design of the environment we're operating in. It's the default setting.
So if you view success as this infinite loop,
then anyone trying to exit that loop or even just pause it, well, they face immediate friction.
or they feel like they're failing. Right.
Yeah.
Because everyone else is still running.
Exactly. You get the promotion, great, but now you've got 3 huge new responsibilities and maybe a looming internal audit. The loop reset instantly.
And if we don't recognize that this chase is the default, the standard operating procedure,
Then we internalize it. We think the lack of rest is some personal failure, or we're not hustling hard enough.
right, we blame ourselves instead of questioning the machine itself.
Precisely. So the moment you sort of accept or at least define success as perpetually ongoing, you realize the pressure, it's probably not going to just magically disappear.
Okay, that's a bit bleak, but I see the point. Understanding that is the first step.
Yes, and that understanding sets the stage for the second, more pragmatic part of the source's argument.
Which is?
We can't really stop the loop, so how do we survive it? How do we manage within it? Okay, so that's where we pivot to the second part of that title. How to pause without losing momentum.
Exactly. And this is where the real tension lies, isn't it?
It feels immediate because pausing implies stopping, taking a break, recovery time.
Right, rest.
But losing momentum, especially in today's competitive world, that sounds like falling behind.
Yeah, you can almost hear the listener thinking, wait, hold on, if I stop, my competition speeds up.
Yeah.
How is that sustainable?
So how does the source resolve that tension?
Well, this is where it delivers its first really interesting conceptual nugget, I think. It starts by redefining momentum.
Redefining it? How?
It argues that our usual cultural definition, momentum as sheer velocity or speed of output.
Like how fast the treadmill is going.
Exactly. It argues that definition is actually dangerously misleading when you're operating on what's essentially an infinite timeline.
Okay, hang on. If momentum isn't speed, then what is it, according to this source? So, the source argues that when success is perpetual, true momentum isn't about speed. It's defined more by consistency of intentional movement.
Consistency?
Yeah, and also the overall health of the operating system, meaning you, your team, your project.
Okay, that makes sense. Because sheer speed, that's just not sustainable forever, right?
Yeah.
An infinite race.
Exactly. Consistency becomes the metric that actually matters long term.
So if you go full speed, crash and burn every 9 months,
Right.
you actually lose more ground, more real progress than someone who moves maybe a bit slower, but steadily, and never stops moving entirely.
That's the core idea. It shifts the focus from just immediate visible output to long-term resource management. How are you managing your energy, your focus, your team's capacity?
Okay, so that's the foundation for the pause then.
Yes. The pause, in this context, it's not a full stop. It's not just quitting.
Yes.
It's the strategic re-leveraging of your resources, doing what's necessary to ensure that long-term consistency.
Like maintenance on a machine.
Perfect analogy. If the machine you is running too hot, the only way to maintain long-term momentum, long-term consistency, is actually to pull back on sheer output for a bit.
And redirect that energy into maintenance.
Exactly. Into sharing up the system.
Now, I worry this might just sound like, fancy corporate jargon for take a weekend off.
Yeah, I get that. But the source seems to position this as something much more strategic, almost a mandatory mechanism for sustainable performance.
Mandatory, so it goes deeper than just rest.
Oh, much deeper. The source defines the strategic pause not as inactivity, but as, get this, high leverage non-output work.
High leverage non-output work. Okay, unpack that a bit. What does that actually look like?
This is where we start getting into the specific methods the source suggests.
Good. Let's dig into the method then. Give us one of the core characteristics of this kind of strategic pause. What does the text actually tell us to do?
Okay, well, one of the primary mechanisms it discusses is something called mandatory reflective deconstruction.
Mandatory reflective deconstruction. Sounds intense.
It kind of is. But the idea is, instead of just taking a break and, checking out mentally.
Binge watching something.
Right. This pause is actually scheduled time. And it's dedicated exclusively to reviewing the system itself, your system.
Okay, so give me an example. If I'm, say, a product developer, instead of just pushing out more code during this pause, I'd spend maybe a mandatory 3 days asking different questions.
Exactly. Questions like, is this product still solving the right problem for our users? Is my team structured in the most efficient way?
Or am I spending like 80% of my time on tasks that only yield 20% of the results? That kind of reflection.
That's precisely the goal. The source really insists that failing to implement this kind of pause, this scheduled maintenance and reflection, is actually the single greatest threat to your long-term momentum.
Why? Because without it,
you might be maximizing speed, sure, but maybe in the completely wrong direction. Or worse, you're building on infrastructure, habits, or assumptions that are fundamentally unsustainable.
Okay. So that reframes the pause entirely. It's not a cost. It's actually an investment.
Absolutely. It shifts the perception of rest away from, oh no, I'm falling behind, towards, I am actively optimizing my future capacity to perform.
Right. You're tuning the engine, not just letting it run until it breaks.
Exactly. And the source even provides a kind of concrete framework for this. They call it the capacity audit.
Capacity audit. Okay, what does that involve?
So during one of these strategic pauses, you're explicitly instructed to measure things like your energy levels, your focus.
Not your external deliverables, like tasks completed.
No, the focus shifts inward. You're essentially assessing the debt you've accumulated, particularly energy debt or focus debt.
Energy debt, I like that phrase. It feels very real.
It does.
So if I've basically maxed out my energy credit card, the point of the pause is to consciously pay down that debt.
Yes.
Before the interest rates, which I guess are burnout, mistakes, poor decision, before they cripple my long-term ability to function.
You nailed it. And the text makes a really powerful distinction here, too.
What's that?
It distinguishes between a vacation or a break that you take after you've already totally collapsed.
That's basically just recovery. You're forced into it.
Right. That's reactive. The strategic pause, however, is taken before you reach collapse.
So it's proactive.
Exactly. It makes it an act of preservation and optimization, not just desperate recovery. And the source argues recovery is always more expensive than preservation.
Preservation is higher leverage. Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
So the key feature of this pause is that it has to be proactive, ideally scheduled. And it must be structured around this kind of reflection and auditing of your own system. It's not just passive rest.
Right, not just consuming entertainment or sleeping off exhaustion, although rest is part of it, I assume.
Of course, physical rest is crucial, but the strategic element comes from the active mental work. It insists on a mental shift.
A shift in how we define productivity during that pause time.
Precisely. If you're conducting that capacity audit, if you're reviewing your performance metrics, if you're restructuring your task flow for better efficiency, the source argues you are actually generating incredibly high-level, high-impact momentum.
Even though your visible output, like email sent or code shipped, might be zero for a few days.
Exactly, because you're defining progress not just by the steps you take, but by improving the efficiency of the machine that takes those steps.
Wow, that really drives home why the pause doesn't necessarily cost you momentum in the long run.
It actually creates sustainable momentum. You're maintaining the engine so it can keep running consistently.
Okay, that makes the whole concept much clearer.
And that leads logically to one of the final points the source makes about this whole thing.
It is.
If success really is perpetual, if it's this infinite loop, then maybe the only truly viable metric for us as individuals isn't absolute achievement, like titles or milestones.
But what?
But our rate of adaptation. How quickly and efficiently can we adjust?
Adaptation. Okay, so the strategic pause with its reflection and auditing. It's designed to enhance our ability to adapt.
That seems to be the argument. To help us quickly shift focus, reallocate energy, and improve efficiency when that perpetual system inevitably throws the next curveball or raises the bar again.
Right, because the bar will keep rising in this model.
Correct. So the faster you can audit your own system, pay down that energy debt, and re-leverage your attention,
the faster you can respond to the next challenge.
Exactly. And crucially, respond without suffering the deep, prolonged cost of burnout each time.
So the pause enhances adaptation.
And adaptation in an infinite loop scenario becomes the ultimate form of sustainable momentum.
That's really where the power of analyzing this source lies, isn't it?
I think so.
It forces us, maybe you listening to stop just treating the symptoms, like feeling exhausted all the time, and start actually addressing the underlying cause, which the source identifies as this infinite system that just requires ongoing strategic management.
Yeah. So if we try to sum up the key takeaways from this source,
okay, let's do that.
We've basically taken that common frustration, the moving goalpost feeling,
right,
and derived two main insights from how this text frames it. First, the paradox is presented as real. Success, in this view, is conceptualized as a perpetual, infinite cycle.
And you kind of have to accept that as the baseline reality to operate effectively within it.
Step one is acceptance, basically. And second, the proposed method for surviving or even thriving within this cycle is the strategic pause.
Which isn't just stopping, but involves redefining momentum as long-term consistency and focusing on that high-leverage, non-output work, like the energy auditing and the reflection.
Right. It really transforms the definition of what hard work or smart work even looks like.
Yeah. Instead of just pushing harder and harder, the source is almost suggesting we need to work smarter by pausing more effectively, more strategically.
And if we circle back to that really fundamental conceptual shift,
the idea about momentum,
Yeah, the idea that momentum in the long run is really about consistency and intention, not just raw speed.
Okay.
Well, that raises one final, maybe provocative thought for you, the listener, to consider.
Always like ending with one of those. What is it?
Well, if this source is right, if strategic pausing is actually necessary for maintaining true long-term momentum on an infinite timeline,
Yeah.
what does that imply about the pace maybe you are running at right now?
If you haven't taken one of these strategic reflective pauses in months or even years,
Are you potentially running so fast, focusing so much on immediate output, that you're actually slowing down your long-term consistency, your long-term momentum?
are you confusing high output right now with actual high momentum over the long haul?
It's a challenging question. Maybe that conscious decision to pause strategically, maybe that's actually the single greatest acceleration tool you have available.
Precisely because it forces you to confront the reality of the perpetual chase and manage your resources for the long game.
Makes you think, doesn't it?
It certainly changes the way you might look at your next vacation request, or even just blocking out time in your calendar.
Absolutely.
Well, we've definitely extracted the foundational concepts here, the paradox and the key mechanisms for that strategic pause from this source material.
Lot to chew on there.
Definitely. Thanks for diving deep with us today.